The Latin root of religion, religio, meaning to rebind. Servant leaders are found in all faiths, philosophies, secular beliefs. What are your thoughts concerning servant leadership, faith, and philosophy?
Some more thoughts on servant leadership, faith, and philosophy for me are the difficulty inherent in any type of system of thought. That any type of system of thought can get bent so easily. For example, there are bad Christians, there are bad Muslims, there are bad servant leaders. There are great Christians, there are great Muslims, there are great servant leaders. There are great people of all faiths, of all the major traditions. And there are very hypocritical and horrible people of all faiths who cause abuse and cause atrocities. And I think we're back to that ground of the shadow of humanity. And where does servant leadership fit in giving us a deeper understanding of what might it mean to be a servant leader? Because there's many people that claim to be a servant leader and then pervasively harm others. I've done that, right? So I claim to be a servant leader in my family. There are times when my family members feel that I have pervasively harmed them, and they're right. So what are we going to do with that crucible, I think, is a great question for all of humanity. What are we going to do with, I myself am a hypocrite? And I think servant leadership gives some very quality reads of that and very quality answers to that. And I love, again, back to the 10 characteristics from Larry Spears, the listening element becomes so profound. If I really listen to my family members or to my coworkers, and then if I engage in a life that is going to become more whole, more free, more autonomous, more healthy, better able to serve others, and then if I gather around me or gather to, myself toward others who are doing that, there's a better chance that the hypocrisy can be we're not talking about eliminating hypocrisy. I think that's part of the human condition. I think it's how to respond to and what to do with foresight regarding our own hypocrisy and the hypocrisy of others. And that's where I think servant leadership has a lot of room in it to expand and to help us understand our own darknesses, either as individuals or as a collective or as organizations in the workplace.
The next question is, what is the role of servant leadership in your own interior life? Have we addressed that in some way, or would you like to address that?
Yeah. The role of servant leadership in my interior life, I see that as something that seeks to be quieter and to slow down and to move in ways that have more quietness with them. So when I think about the interior of the servant leader, and I try to look at that in my own life, I try to remember, get quiet in the morning, put myself in a bodily posture of humility in the morning. And this generally comes from my mentors too, who have been deep servant leaders to me. Quietness to start the day, humility with the body to start the day. Be in a bodily posture of love and affection to my loved ones first and primarily, but also out to the world throughout the day. So I think of that as I want to physically touch my loved ones every day in good ways. I want to put my hands on their face. I want to look into their eyes. I want to embrace them. I want to hold their hand, especially since I have 3 daughters and they're young. That makes it easy. And I want to be there with them physically, to be present. So the interior of the servant leader for me has something to do with quietness, listening, and being present.
What are useful ways in which servant leaders can best deal with conflict?
Useful ways for servant leaders to best deal with conflict, to me, have to do with approaching something from a listening perspective, approaching it with the long road in mind, that we don't need to heal this immediately and we shouldn't want to. That we're okay with a long-term conversation and a long-term commitment toward character change, and that we develop a organization or a family or a nation that's okay with the longer processes of healing and growth and the commitment it takes to have joy and grace and ease around that longer process, while we know we're going to confront things consistently like depression and anger and frustration and alienation. But having a sustaining source of love and power that directs us through these crucibles that have to do with conflict. And so if I just gave one story, I think I'd go with an individual one on that. And I think of Parker Palmer's story in his book about when he talks about suffering from depression and an interior conflict he was having. I think it's a book called Let Your Life Speak. And he was having this interior conflict with himself that I think we've all experienced. It's excruciating, and we don't know how we're going to get out of it. And the answers were not coming easily. And he did put himself bodily in a position to receive some possible answers. And I think that was by going to Quaker community, in his case, and just being there. And who knows when some of these resolutions might come, but the thing that eventually ended up being helpful, because he kept seeking, like, kind of in a fierce way, seeking the answer. And then he was confronted by the need to surrender instead of showing ferocity towards gathering an answer. And he started surrendering. And he recalls this time when the older gentleman that was his mentor would just come in and just rub his feet. That's it. Wouldn't give him advice, or wouldn't answer his ferocious need to get an answer. Or in reality, he answered it in a much deeper way, I guess. Like he just be there, present, and just showing care, basically, and in a way that was deeply meaningful to the other person. I think that's important. I think that's foresight also. Showing care in a way that's deeply meaningful to the other person, and sometimes that might not even be what the person wants. And that, to me, that's some of that foresight about, Parker Palmer maybe didn't initially want his feet rubbed. You know what I mean? Like, it probably was a bit uncomfortable, I would say, in the beginning. I think Parker even relates that. But eventually there was some resolution that had a deep care in it, maybe even deeper than what the hurting person could see at that time. And maybe even deeper than what the physical person who was showing care could see, but he knew something that was important in his giving. And that inspires me.
Is there a question that you wish you could have asked Robert Greenleaf?
If I had the opportunity to ask Robert Greenleaf a question, I would probably ask him, what would your wife name as your primary weaknesses, and how would she speak about the ways you two worked to heal those? And for me, I would ask that because I notice in my readings of Greenleaf's writings, there appears to be a really nice love between him and his wife. And, nobody can really know the interior of a love relationship. However, the one between him and his wife seems to be pretty vibrant and pretty vital and pretty powerful. So I think it'd be safe in asking that question, and I think I would get a wonderful answer.
What excites you most about servant leadership, and why?
The thing that excites me the most about servant leadership is the focus on listening, the quietness, and the way, if people individually and people collectively attend to that type of listening and that type of quietness, things change and others do become more healthy and more wise and more healed and more autonomous and more free.
Do you have thoughts about servant leadership that we haven't touched on that you would like to share?
I think when I think of servant leadership, for me, probably because I love the idea of the family as a central core to societies around the world, I would love to see a focus that comes out of how do we train servant leaders from the time that they're children, and how do parents live as servant leaders. That's something that I feel would really help us as a country and as a world.